Hello once more Canonites, and welcome back for my first Canon Fodder coverage in a while. I've already missed out on 2 issues, and with the new Encyclopedia dropping tomorrow, I figured it's time to get off my ass and talk about this stuff. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Naturally, we'll start out with last month's Canon Fodder, issue number 125, of Protocols and Prisoners, which opened with the cover art for the upcoming Halo Outcasts. A new novel from the talented Troy Denning, marking the author's 8th story and 7th book in the Halo universe. The book will follow Arbiter Thel 'Vadam and Spartan Olivia Vale during the created crisis in 2559. You can check out the previous Canon Fodder video for the details on the plot, but the basics are that Thel and Vale head to the world of Netherop, a world that is featured a few times in Troy's works, though especially in Halo Oblivion, for an opportunity to bring down Cortana. Unfortunately, Thel and Vale are both being manipulated by an unknown third party, and all 3 are about to come at odds with an even greater force. Last month, we got to see its cover, and it's everything I could have hoped for. We have Arbiter Thel 'Vadam in his Halo 5 Kaiden's armor, wielding the Prophet's Bane energy sword, and Spartan Olympia Vale with an M20 SMG and, interestingly, her Gen 2 Copperhead class Mjolnir. By the time of Halo Shadows of Reach in October 2559, Blue Team and several Spartan 4 teams had switched to the Gen 3 Mjolnir platform. I'm curious if we'll hear any information on the transition from Gen 2 to Gen 3 in this book. The 2 stand together on Netherop, while another Sangheili in a new set of armor stalks the 2 nearby, likely the unknown manipulator. I can't say how likely this might be, but I'd love if this were Nizat Kuvarosi, a former Sangheili officer exiled on Netherop in 2526, and a major character from Halo Oblivion. In general, with the return to Netherop, I hope we get some follow-up on the Sangheili who were stranded there, along with Lieutenant Commander Amelia Petrov, who also had to remain on Netherop in Oblivion. The big question remains about what this force beyond comprehension is. Banished, the created, something Forerunner, or perhaps something new and native to Netherop. The planet, while long dead by the time of the Human Covenant War, was home to a currently unknown civilization. That, most of all, is what excites me about returning to the planet. Halo Outcasts is currently slated for release on October 18th, 2022. We can additionally look forward to Halo: The Rubicon Protocol by Kelly Gay on August 9th. From there, the article discusses a few topics, though eventually lands on discussing the Flood, which will be appearing soon in Halo 3 ODST's Firefight mode in MCC. As we would see in both Halo 4 and Halo Spartan Assault, Spartan 4s are the first line of defense against the parasite should it ever return. In the case of future Flood outbreaks, which the official Spartan Field Manual indicates have happened on a small scale, the UNSC has developed Emergency Contact Code Upsilon, which should sound familiar to fans of the Halo TV series. When Upsilon is declared, all UEG and UNSC rules of engagement are suspended until the threat is contained. In the case of a Spartan being infected by the Flood, the UNSC has various protocols in place to eliminate such a threat. One example comes from the Gallows Visor in Halo 5, which is made for special forward observation teams operating in quarantine zones. Failsafe charges in the Gallows Visor will destroy the helmet and anything within, should anything be compromised. And should those failsafes prove ineffective, the UNSC will declare the Corruptor Protocol, authorizing the use of weapons of mass destruction, including orbital max strikes and nukes. From there, the article moves on to a few additional topics. They announced the release of a PDF version of Halo Rebirth, an epilogue to Halo Silentium written by Chloe Baer, daughter of Greg Baer. Originally released in audio form, the book can now be downloaded for free. The story is a great follow-up to Silentium and a wonderful bookend to the Forerunner Flood War. Definitely check it out if you haven't already. After that, the article dives into some details on the various banished outposts from Halo Infinite's campaign and the Silexes, details for which I've integrated into my breakdown series for Infinite. Finally, the article closes on a community Q&A, which we'll touch on at the end of this video since the next issue of Canon Fodder also features a Q&A section. Speaking of which, let's dive into our second issue of Canon Fodder for today, Encyclopedic Enlightenment. Just as it sounds, the issue is meant to dive into details about the new Halo Encyclopedia, and boy does it. To kick things off, the article talks about a roundtable discussion led by Alex Wakeford and featuring Jeremy Patnaud, Jeff Easterling, and Kenneth Peters, members of 343's writing team and some of the people behind the content of the Halo Encyclopedia. A few clips of this roundtable have been tweeted out by 343, and they've been fairly interesting so far. The full version should hopefully release after the encyclopedia itself is out. After some art previews, Usa Zealous carrying a burn blade and armor inspired by the original Elite look, Spartan 3 Lucy B091, a Silent Shadow Assassin, the previous 3 all being by David Heidehoff, Krellis of the Keepers of the One Freedom by Stanton Fang, a Varric Pattern Heavy Cruiser by Jared Harris of the Sins of the Prophets team, and a C-718 Longsword by Ben Moreau. The article treats us to some previews of the book itself. Either you've seen these by now or you haven't, and breaking down everything wouldn't really make for an interesting video, at least not right now. So if you're interested, check out those pages on Halo Waypoint. Otherwise, I'll wait until after release and make some dedicated videos on topics that sound interesting from the encyclopedia. That all said, I was very excited to see that the ancient spacefaring humanity have their own designation now, the Ancestors, with ancient humanity now referring to humanity after they were devolved and before the receding. The encyclopedia will come in 3 versions upon release: a basic version, a deluxe version with a Silex-themed cover and exclusive lithograph, and a digital version. So if the physical editions aren't an option for you for whatever reason, or you just want the encyclopedia on the go like me, there are options, and I'll definitely be picking up that digital version. After the previews, the Canon Fodder dedicates a little time to the upcoming Season 2 of Halo Infinite. More details will follow in a future issue, though we are informed that the new Spartans are named Hugh Din and Sigrid Elkund. Hopefully we'll have dedicated story content for these characters, as I still refuse to touch Halo Infinite multiplayer right now, and Season 2 doesn't really have anything to bring me back at the moment. There might be some cool lore content buried in Season 2, but at the moment the game is not fun to play, and I'm not going to play it just for lore content. Anyway, from there the article spends a lot of time diving into the opening cutscene of Halo Infinite and the ideas behind it, before arriving at the Q&A. Though, as I noted before, we'll start with the previous issue's questions, then move on to the newer ones. So first up, Monica Lowry asks about the message capsule Veda Lopez delivered to Fred 104 in Halo Shadows of Reach. The top third of that message apparently contained stuff of personal significance for Fred, while the rest was information on the Keepers of the One Freedom and the Ferret's infiltration of the group, which was of course passed along to Oni. For Ur's sake then asks about the status of New Phoenix following the events of Halo 4 and Halo Spartan Strike. The city was closed following the July 2557 incidents and placed under quarantine for study. The city would be reopened 8 months later by UEG President Ruth Charrett, as depicted in Halo Escalation Issue 7. Halo VFX asks next about what Jerome 092 and Red Team are up to by the time of Halo Infinite's campaign, though no solid answers are given, unsurprisingly. Red Team was last featured, albeit briefly, in Halo Divine Wind, which is set in October 2559, immediately after Halo Shadows of Reach. Speaking of Divine Wind, Zanzi asks after Let Voliere, the Sangheili commander from Halo Wars 2, who was left in charge of the banished forces on the Ark when Atriox returned to the Milky Way. We really need a Halo Wars 3. After that, Bunny asks what Spartan 4s did on average prior to the loss of the Infinity. While this can vary from Spartan to Spartan, based on assigned missions and preferences, most non-mission time is spent in relation to training. Additionally, Spartans are not excused from routine maintenance and menial day-to-day tasks. A popular spot when Spartans have downtime, however, is Infinity's Memorial Park Atrium, essentially a slice of nature aboard the spaceship. The Thinnest Mint next asks whether other UNSC forces are on Zeta Halo. The ring was discovered by humanity in 2555, with UNSC research outposts and infrastructure set up soon after. What happened to these locations and their personnel remains unknown at the moment, though any survivors, along with Marine forces who may have been scattered across the ring elsewhere, mean that there may be other scattered pockets of resistance on the ring. The Trexpert, fantastic name, then asks a question I've been thinking about for years: how did the Forerunners intend to use Thano Lekgolo, the large Lekgolo gestalt we saw in Halo Nightfall, against the Flood? When Nightfall first released, many fans were confused by the rabid Lekgolo colonies featured in the series, which 343 later explained were one of the 1,000 other plans tried and failed before the Forerunners resorted to Halo. Here, we're told that Oni has since speculated that Thano Lekgolo colonies may have been deployed to consume any technology the Flood might use before the main Forerunner force was deployed. I never thought of that as a possibility myself, but given what we saw in Nightfall with the Lekgolo being attracted to technology, it makes sense. The last question for this part comes from Peached Crane 60, who asks whether the Banished utilized Ungoi breeding chambers. In the Covenant, because Ungoi can reproduce so fast, strict laws were put in place to control their numbers. During the Human Covenant War, however, their fast reproduction was used to field overwhelming numbers of Ungoi. The Banished are generally pretty laissez-faire towards Ungoi breeding on Zeta Halo. And with that, we move over to the second set of questions, starting with one from Covenant Canon about the canonicity of Mega Construct sets, like the Shields of Requiem Lance. Generally though, you can consider the Mega Construct sets canon unless directly contradicted by other sources. In the case of the Shield of Requiem Lance, however, we get a more detailed response. Veterans of Julum Dama's campaign on Requiem, the shields now work for hire for any Covenant remnant willing to pay. Operating out of their Lich, the Sundered Psalm, the unlikely band of Covenant species retains their faith despite their circumstances. Next up, the Scout Trooper asks how many of the Banished Bloodstars, aka the high-value targets, and Spartan killers have shown up unidentified in previous material. An excellent question if I do say so myself. The answer in part actually references my own recent video on the HVTs of Halo Infinite, in which I do mention, when applicable, the character's connections to the larger canon. Although, we are told that Jaga Erdamnai's origins might be out there in the expanded fiction. Jaga was once a member of the Silent Shadow Spec Ops group within the Covenant, which most notably appear in the Halo Evolution's short story Headhunters, and the short comic Hunting Party from the Halo Tales from Slipspace anthology. The party of Silent Shadow apparently all died at the end of Headhunters, though I could see 343 deciding that one survived, albeit badly injured. Alternatively, in Hunting Party, we have a group of Silent Shadow assassins joining the Banished post-war, Jaga perhaps being among them. It's noted in pre-release material that Jaga had hunted Spartans before, so the idea of him being a survivor from the events of Headhunters seems to fit really well. But the Sangheili's true origins will have to wait for another day. Leda Terminus next asks if we might hear about other Jiralhanae worlds following the destruction of Doisak, or the Doisacking as Alex refers to it, and we're told that the aftermath of the razing of Oath Sonin, the Jiralhanae home system, is covered in the Encyclopedia. Next, Mester Chef 117 asks whether anything from the Silver timeline will be covered in the Encyclopedia. To the relief of many, I'm sure, the Encyclopedia focuses entirely on core canon. That said, I wouldn't mind getting canon information on stuff that has so far only appeared in the TV series or Silver timeline, such as the Zhang He-class courier. Dan Zeddy then asks whether the Encyclopedia will cover content from stuff like Halo 4 Forward Unto Dawn or the Halo Legends anime anthology, which it will, with those being part of the core canon. Next up, Eternal Canadian asks a rather interesting production question: how does 343 decide when to make new assets for a project like the Encyclopedia, as opposed to reusing existing assets? Alex explains that the team has to consider a number of factors, from the object's importance to the quality of existing assets, if applicable, to how much space an object will ultimately take up on the page, among other things. The last three questions for this article then all ask about whether specific stuff will appear in the Encyclopedia. Blackhawk 510 asks about seeing depictions of other UNSC fighters, Cool Fruit Cup asks if we'll get more info on species like the Legolo or Yanmaya, and Morheck asks about seeing the Carve, a banished ship introduced in Halo Shadows of Reach. To be brief, the Encyclopedia is going to be packed. And with that, this Canon Fodder catch-up comes to a close. Definitely give them a read if you haven't already, and let me know in those comments below if you're excited for this new Encyclopedia. It's not even a day away, and I personally still can't wait. From the leaks I've seen, this book is going to be everything I could want from an encyclopedia and more. Thank you for always as watching. This has been Halo Canon, and I'll see y'all next time. Thank you once again for watching, Canonites. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, maybe even share it around, both of which help the channel. And if you aren't subscribed already, consider becoming a fellow Canonite and hitting that notification bell so you won't miss any future videos. Halo Canon now has a Discord server, which you can find linked in the description box below. If you like discussing any aspect of Halo's lore, well, that's what we specialize in. Thank you all once more, and keep on being awesome.